All right, now that we've spent some time going over the basics of what context is and how to manage context, it's time to move into the fun stuff where we actually get to try this stuff out. And we're going to talk a little bit about structured reasoning first so that we can understand how to prompt these models in a way that allows them to go through step-by-step instructions and perform more complex tasks that will help you out when you're doing your work. So the first question is, what is structured reasoning? Structured reasoning is breaking down complex tasks into clear sequential steps for the bots to follow. And I want you to think about this as if you were trying to explain to someone who had just been born on the earth exactly how to do a relatively simple task. And you might think that that's pretty obvious at first, but oftentimes the example people use, and I'll probably butcher this, is telling someone how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, where you start by saying, all right, you take the peanut butter and you take the knife and you put the peanut butter on the bread. And without opening the bread or without opening the peanut butter, the person sort of tries to jam the knife through the lid and cuts open the paper. And I say this just to illustrate that sometimes you have to be extra redundant in these instructions because there are many assumptions and implications and inferences that go into the type of work that journalists do, as I'm sure you'll understand if you think really deeply about it. And so in order to do this, we have to make the LLMs sort of work through these issues step by step, and doing so can also help make the entire process a little bit more transparent, and it gets rid of that sort of black box problem where you don't really understand what's going on or how certain leaps or jumps were made. And again, this is super useful for tasks that require critical analysis of multiple sources, or especially large source materials. So in order to do this, you start by identifying your desired goal, your end result or deliverable. What do you want the bot to return to you? And then from there, you sort of work backwards. And you can start by breaking down the task into distinct phases. For instance, you can break it down into the research phase or an analysis phase, and then finally a synthesis phase. And you're doing all of this to create clear sequential instructions for each phase. And again, not every structured prompt needs to have all of this complexity to it, but you do want to make sure you include checkpoints and opportunities for the bot to check in or ask additional follow-up or clarifying questions to make sure it has all the information necessary to proceed. And of course, with everything, you want to make sure you go back and you fine-tune your tests and make sure that the outputs you receive are good. So here are a few types of reporting related or journalism related tasks that would benefit most from structured prompts. Things like analyzing complex documents such as legislation or court filings, when it's important to find patterns or inconsistencies in interview transcripts, when you need to extract and organize key information from large data sets or evaluate the credibility of statements or sources. Especially useful when you're planning interview questions that is based on thorough and robust background research, or simply breaking down complex topics to help you do a better job explaining certain issues in your journalism. Now, as far as how detailed you should be, you do want to make sure that each step is specific enough that the purpose and use of each step is very clear to yourself and to the bot. Sometimes you might need to explain the reasoning and include some context or clarification for what you're going to do with that information. And especially when it comes to analytical tasks, you want to break down those individual components very detailed and very explicitly. The more judgment and more critical evaluation that's required, the more detail you should be putting into each of the steps in your prompt. Again, you do want to make sure, just like when you're talking about the context that you're managing, whether or not you need to dump the entire transcript in or just pull out sections or highlights. With this, you also want to try to balance that level of detail with a level of clarity. If you're too verbose, if you're too wordy, sometimes the models can get confused and your outputs won't be as good. And you'll sort of figure out when it's most useful to do these kinds of things, depending on the task that you're doing. Again, every time, I'm going to say it a million times during this module and during the other modules, you always have to verify everything these bots give you. You can basically just have to assume that they're lying to you or misleading you every time, even on the simple stuff. It's especially important to include explicit instructions that require the bot to cite its sources or explain why did you choose this quote, why is this quote useful, why did you pull this information instead of other information. Also ask the bot to go back and review its own responses from time to time to explain why it chose this or why it left certain things out, and to identify any potential biases in the responses. Also, of course, make sure you play around with the different steps and different phases and test different variations of your prompts so you can get that just right before you move that into a larger production. And always incorporate feedback and moderation loops. So any chance you can insert a step of moderation, whether it's in the automation steps, which we're going to cover in the next module, or if it's simply just asking the bot to stop and review its responses before continuing. So again, the core components of this include clear task definitions, explicit steps for the bots to follow, including clear examples or demonstrations of what a good and a bad response looks like can be really useful as well. It's also good to make sure that you have a framework for evaluating the quality of your responses in advance, or at least as you go along, you are taking notes of what it does well and what it does poorly. And of course, you don't always need a super complex prompt with super complex structured reasoning. Sometimes it's enough just to add little bits of chain of thought or step-by-step thinking to the process, and you will get the results that you desire at a quality that is acceptable. So let's go ahead and test this out, and I'll show you what I mean. So right here, I have a relatively long structured prompt that I am going to give to this bot. And this is what I call the JournalBot. And this can be really useful for both professional journaling when you don't have time to sit down and write out a very structured and well thought out journal entry. You want to just sort of take notes or throw a note at this bot and have it take unstructured information and turn it into a structured data entry. Again, this can be used for professional journaling, just sort of keeping tabs on your activities over the course of time. I personally love to use it in combination with the voice mode for ChatGPT or Claude. So I just hit the record button, record a voice note where I just sort of stream of consciousness ramble about what I did that day or the takeaways or immediate thoughts that I had about an interview or a meeting that I went to. And then I have explicit instructions here that I can give to a GPT or a custom GPT, a Claude prompt or a Claude project. And it is laid out so that it takes the unstructured message from the user and converts it into a structured, organized, and pretty useful journal entry that I can then either pull into a CSV format, or I can group them into a digest and then have another bot analyze them later and compile them into a more coherent narrative form. So let's go ahead and take a tour through this. So we start up at the top here with our intro, our welcome message or our introductory message, like we talked about in our prompt structure anatomy. And it says the user will provide an unstructured text or voice message, and your job, meaning the job of the bot, is to convert each user message you receive into a structured journal entry. Take the unstructured information from the user and turn it into structured information so the user can organize it into a standardized format and make sense of it when the user refers back to it at a later date. So this is our introduction, and this is our instructions here. Then we move forward into our additional instructions. The context will come later. So for each entry, you must include a date and timestamp. I'm just going to take that out there. If the user does not provide you with a date timestamp, ask the user for the current date or search the internet, if possible, to find the current date before proceeding. Each time you receive a user request, you are only to organize the topics and issues in the user message into a coherent structured journal entry. Do not provide any additional explanations or commentary. So here again, we're driving home these constraints. I don't want any yapping. I don't want any commentary. Just do what I told you to do. At the end of each structured entry, generate 4 to 7 relevant tags and keywords related to the topics and issues in the user request. The tags should be in comma-separated value format and sorted by order of relevance and importance. And here I give a little example, as I mentioned earlier, for one, it might be an interview, background info, Bloomfield Council, housing, and affordability. So then you'll see all of a sudden I'm switching here. I've now given my base prompt. This is the instructions. And now I'm going to provide the structure. And I'm also going to be obviously giving this bot an understanding and an overview of a template, what kind of response I want and what format it should take. I want to start, and I'm using Markdown here, not only because I want it to understand the hierarchy of these, headings and everything, but because I wanted to actually use Markdown formatting to create headings and subheadings and bullet points and bolding and text formatting. So we have, here is the format and structure you should return for each entry. We have our timestamp in an H3. I just threw a random date in there. Then an H2 for the subject, and in square brackets, which serves as a placeholder where the bot will generate its actual description and label, we have generate a simple but descriptive subject or label. Then in H3, we have issue 1, generate a simple but descriptive label for the primary topic or issue in the user request. And then we have our observation, where I wanted to describe or summarize the primary topic or issue, and our implication, to describe the implications of the primary topic or issue. And it may seem repetitive and redundant here, but because we have a secondary topic and a tertiary topic, we've added these just in case. So then it just continues, issue 2, issue 3. Now I could also say, down here, I can add an H3 and say add additional issue headings and observations and description implications as needed. Right? We don't need to do this. It'll probably assume that that's the case, but I also don't want to. I want to make sure that it's not only going to do 3 every time, or it's going to force 3 issues and observations when it only needs like 1 or 2. So this is just to indicate to keep going if necessary, or stop if you don't need to. Then finally, we have our overall implications and impressions, starting with the top level, general highlight or takeaway, and then any additional highlights or takeaways. And then we said add additional highlights and takeaways as necessary or appropriate. And at the bottom, we have our tags and keywords. All right, so let's go ahead and paste in our prompt from that Google Doc and send it. And here we go. So we've seen it's just making something up right now, and it's basically giving me the template and including that. It's counting this as a user entry. So let's go back up here and let's edit this. And at the end, we're going to add a little bit of additional instructions and say the above text is just the instructions and formatting template. Let me know when you are ready to receive the first real user request. And we'll try that. Let's send that and see what it does. Okay, beautiful. So we can check the reasoning. I need to respond according to the instructions. The message should simply say, I'm ready. It's clear that I shouldn't add any extra explanation. So it doesn't even listen to its own instructions here. I'll send a message saying I'm ready, and it says, I'm ready to receive your first real user request. You can see why I added things like don't provide any additional explanations or commentary, because it just is dying to yap at you. So now that it's ready for the first real user request, let's go ahead and give it one. Today is March 25th, 2025, and it is currently 6:25 p.m. And I spent most of the day working on the web content for the Collaborative Journalism Summit, which will be hosted on May 15th and 16th, 2025 in Denver, Colorado. Right now, we're working on the schedule page, making sure all of the panels and sessions are updated and correct. And we're also working to collect the last few speaker information forms to make sure that all of our speakers are featured and their information is correct on the speakers page. I've also been working to optimize and update the attendee dashboard web app that I'm building, because right now it's a little bit bulky and heavy, and the hosting costs and the amount of bandwidth that it's using is a bit more than we need and that we can afford. So I'm working to find ways to optimize the code base to make sure that it actually runs smoothly while also not costing us as much money. And then finally, toward the end of the day, I spent some time making an event poster and other graphics and promotional media to increase attendance and encourage people to sign up for the summit, because right now our attendance numbers are a little lower than we'd like, but we're not quite ready to reduce the cost of the tickets or send out a bunch more promo and discount codes to users, because we need to recoup some of our costs. Okay, so here's our messy prompt, our messy user request, our journal entry into a structured data entry. So it's gone in order here. It's gone 3 issues. It's got 3 overall implications and impressions, and it's got tags and keywords here. And it looks like it's done almost exactly what we wanted. We don't want to have to do this every time we come and open the app, or at least we don't want to have to do a new chat. And as these conversations go on and on, if I do this over the course of months, obviously I'm going to have a little trouble here. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take these instructions and I'm going to create what is known as a project. This is valid in both Claude and in ChatGPT, but because we've already done some ChatGPT, let's go over and do the same thing with Claude. So we're going to go to projects, we're going to create a project, and we're going to name it JournalBot. JournalBot. And our project goals and subject, etc. We're just going to put this, the first part in here, and we're going to leave the format for the custom instructions. So I'll cut that, we'll leave that, we're going to create a project, and it's that easy. So now we have our project knowledge here, we can upload documents if we want, but we don't really need that just yet. So I'm going to click the set the project instructions, and we are going to add some instructions. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to add the format and structure for each entry. I'm actually going to add the entire thing. There it is, from top to bottom, and I'm going to save the instructions. And as you can see, it's there. We have our overall purpose here. We have our user instructions or our project instructions. And let's try that again. And let's see how this does with the same exact information. So here, let's copy this and let's bring it to Claude and let's just dump it in there. And now let's see if Claude asks for the date. You can see we've got the project noted here. Let's hit it. So Claude does know the date, and it didn't exactly follow our instructions to shut up and just do it. And it says instead of at current time, instead of actually putting the time, it puts at current time. All right, so let's see how it does with the second journal entry. There we go. So it appears that on second response, something about this first response here, it feels compelled to introduce its response, but this time it seems to have worked. So that is an overview of structured reasoning, and you can do this with interviews, you can do this with notes, thoughts, anything you want. That is an example of how you can take structured step-by-step prompting instructions and turn unstructured thoughts into structured, usable, and catalogable, and ultimately searchable data entries and journal entries. And this, again, this can be done with sources. You can take context. You can add your style guides to the project knowledge. You can include transcripts alongside your prompts. The possibilities are really wide open. And if you go to one of the guides that I wrote on custom GPTs, you can see all the different use cases and get some ideas on how you might be able to use this in your reporting. So now it's your turn. I want you to think really hard about some of the tasks that might be useful to employ these kinds of structured prompts. And I want you to sit down and I want you to just start writing out some of the instructions. What do you have to do when you are cataloging or documenting some of your activities, your notes, your pre-interview stuff, and try to come up with some scenarios and some instructions that are structured and have step-by-step process and reasoning involved, and test it. Play around with some of these tools, try some projects, maybe even try a custom GPT, and see what you get, see what kind of results you get. And if it's useful, when we get to the next module, we'll talk about how you can take those instructions, the context, and you can pull that outside of the chatbot interface and connect it to some of your other apps like Slack or Teams, or even forwarding an email or tagging a specific email with some notes or information in it, and automatically having it generate a structured journal entry or structured response, and then inputting that information into a place where you can store it and refer back to it for future research or evaluation. So good luck out there, and I'll see you in the next video.